Welcome back to From the Burbs to the Tetons. We're continuing our series on site plans, specifically my site plan. Hopefully the stuff I cover relates to what you're doing and it helps you out. If you have some questions about a site plan you're doing and I don't cover something, go ahead and put a question in the comments below and I'll try and answer it, or I'll research it a little bit. Remember that I'm building in Idaho, so a lot of the laws are going to be specific to my property. I'm also building in Teton County, Idaho, and some of them are going to be county level rules and regs that apply specific to my land. But in general, a lot of this stuff is just common sense things and are likely to apply to you as well. But always make sure you double check. So the first thing about my site plan, which look at our previous one, I kind of went through the iterations I did as far as coming up with a site plan. The first thing I need to do is get on the property, and I'm going to have to put in a culvert. Now in Teton County, there's a nonprofit called the Grand Teton Canal Company, and its purpose is to maintain and control all the canals in the valley. And for those of you who've never seen a system like this before, literally it's just a ditch, but there's miles upon miles of these ditches that are all hooked together that take the water by specific farms and also to specific streams and rivers. And they're responsible for making sure that they stay in good repair and they do what they're supposed to do. They're about 4 feet wide and about 1.5 feet high. I'll go over that some more in just a second. But the first thing I want to cover is, getting permission to add or modify the canal. Now, in Teton County, I had to get permission from the Grand Teton Canal Company. And every time I mentioned their name, just everybody rolled their eyes. Oh my gosh, yeah, that's going to be hard to do. Almost like I'd be lucky to be able to do it. And they do have a right-of-way on my property. Now, the definition of a right-of-way is where somebody has the right to use your property for a specific purpose. They don't own your property. They don't control your property completely. Otherwise, they'd own it, They have a very specific use case they're allowed to. Now, to work with the Grand Teton Canal Company, I needed to know specifically what their right-of-way was. And I kept asking everybody, it's like, I don't see anything on my deed or my title. Where's the right-of-way? County, do you have that information? Eventually somebody said, I think it might be a state level thing. And lo and behold, they were right. Idaho State has laws on their books for dealing with water rights and controlling the water and the flow of water to farms. Now, the first one they have is Title 18, Chapter 43, Irrigation Works. And that deals with modifying the irrigation that's already existing. Let's say you have a canal and you want to put it in a pipe. You want to do something with that part of your land, so you want to actually move the canal and retrench it in another direction so you can use that specific part of your land. I'm not going to cover that one because most people aren't going to pay to do that. They're not going to take an existing irrigation system and completely reroute it. 9 times out of 10, what they're trying to do is you have some irrigation there and I need to be able to get by it in some way or somehow. For me, it was a driveway. So let's move on to what would, cover that. So that's going to be Title 42, Irrigation and Drainage, Water Rights and Reclamation. And that's Chapter 11, Right-of-Way. So basically what it says is that you have to get permission from the person who owns the right-of-way to modify the canal. Now, when you start looking at these laws and things, sometimes you're going to say, well, wait a minute, they just contradicted themselves. Actually, they didn't. The way the laws are written, and just legalese in general, is they start with kind of like summary, and then they start getting more specific. So the more specific it gets, it overrides whatever was above. Okay, so the first thing they do is they talk about the fact that they're allowed to be there, that there is a right-of-way granted to the party that's responsible for that canal, that they need to maintain it. It's up to them to do all the maintenance and keep it up to speed. And then the next little piece of it, it says basically the right-of-way they have automatically transfers from owner to owner to owner. So it's not like, oh, if, when I bought my property, all of a sudden that right-of-way went away. No, it transferred to me then at that point that I had given the right-of-way. And then the next one is, do you want to modify it? Not move it, modify it. And it says that you should get permission from the person who owns the right-of-way. And then in this case, it would be the Grand Teton Canal Company. And then the next thing it says is that, well, if you didn't get permission and you put it in, encroachment of any kind placed in such a right-of-way without express written permission of the owner of the right-of-way shall be removed at the expense of the person or entity causing or permitting such encroachment, upon the request of the owner of the right-of-way. In the event that any such encroachment unreasonably or materially interferes with the use or enjoyment of the right-of-way. So, again, I'm not a lawyer, but if I put my legalese brain to work, what it says specifically is as long as I don't encroach or unreasonably or materially interfere with the use or enjoyment of the right-of-way. So they have a 4-foot wide, 18-inch high canal. And if you calculate the volume of water that can flow through that space, as long as my culvert will handle that amount of volume of water, I haven't encroached on their use of the easement or the right-of-way that they have. So even if I didn't get permission, I could go back and say, well, no, I'm not going to remove that because I haven't encroached on your use of your right-of-way. The same amount of volume of water can flow through that canal or my culvert that I put in as it could through the canal if the culvert wasn't there. And that's really what their right-of-way is all about, is being able to control the flow of water through that canal. So don't be afraid of these folks. Also, you don't need to be a jerk to them either. They're, 9 times out of 10, these folks probably get so much crap from people that they have their armor on right out of the gate. So just be reasonable with them. So the Grand Teton Canal Company had kind of let it known that they were going to make everybody put bridges in from now on. And the reason for doing that is in the past, they really didn't make a lot of people put in as nice of culverts as they probably should have, or big enough culverts. So what's happened over the years, those culverts have become out of disrepair and not enough water can flow through them anymore. The main reason that's happening is because they don't have retaining walls. So when you don't have a retaining wall, what happens is the stones, as you drive in the middle of the driveway, it kicks the stones to the outside. Well, eventually it's going to kick the stones to the outside and then into the actual canal. The second thing that happens too is because the water isn't running real fast around the culvert, right? It's down low it will be, but up higher it's not. Grass will grow there. And I've seen the grass grow to the point where it actually is like in the culvert itself. And I'm sure it's slowing down the flow of the water. So people aren't cutting the grass. And most of these, now this is going to be a driveway for me, but most of these are like pipe stems to a neighborhood. So you go in and it's like a 2-lane road that's owned by that neighborhood development, and nobody's really in charge of keeping up the culvert. Probably every 10 years they pay somebody to come out and clean it up a little bit. For a couple of years it stays in pretty good shape, but the other 8 years it's probably a mess. So let's move on to the culvert design. So the first thing we had to do is figure out where we were going to put the driveway, and here are the 2 sticks. We went over this in the last video, the 2 sticks with the red electrical tape on top, showing where the entrance of the driveway is going to be. It's 22 feet wide there, The culverts that I purchased were a total of 24 feet wide. Then you take off some room for the retaining walls, a little bit of dead space between the retaining walls. 22 feet is about what you get for the width of the driveway. Going through the culvert, it's actually going to be 18 feet because that's what it needs to be by statute in the county for fire engines to be able to pass each other. I also had to take measurements of the canal on exactly how big it was. And one of the things that slowed me down a lot is if you look at this canal, it looks 2.5, 3 feet wide. The problem is there's 6 to 8 inches of additional canal underneath the grass that's growing and hanging into the canal. And this is a perfect example of what's happening at the end of the culverts on ones that have been in place for, let's say, 20 years. All this grass is growing into it, covering up the opening. The water comes rushing down and hits this, and this grass is strong. It's really strong. I've got the cuts on my legs to prove it. When I did the weed whacking to clear all the grass so we could actually see where we were walking, this is a springtime picture. We'd actually put the culvert in the fall, and the grass was 2 feet high. So I think this is a good place to stop for this video, and then we can just pick right up in the next video on construction. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell button if you want to know when I've uploaded my next video. And see you on the next one.